What's going on, motherfuckers? Welcome to the Crocs and Hot Pockets podcast. My name is Knackers, and today is Saturday, December 18th, 2021. This is episode number 169. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Tonight on the show, I've got HunterAP to talk about some really important shit. What's going on, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing good. Hope you're doing well. Hope everybody here watching is doing well, listening. Somewhere.
Absolutely. Where are you? I greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your Saturday to come by and talk about this. I have gotten more and more intrigued with the software side of things as of late, and everything that I guess I sometimes sort of forget how much of the streaming world is software. Like, we all see it as like audio, video, and hardware, and we actually forget about how much of the software side. And it probably has something to do with the majority of developers not really being on social media, right? Like when you think about like developers, they are usually like a certain type of personality, certain type of person, maybe a little bit more reserved, not so infatuated with the limelight of social media. They're like, I'm here to fucking work. And all right, I'm here to get the job done. And so maybe they seem a little bit on the more quiet side. And, we've actually had more and more I guess like of these situations on social media that involves software. So before we get into it, tell us a little bit about yourself. We've had you on the podcast before. Fantastic episode, might I say. And it's one of the main reasons why I was so excited to have you back, because that was such a good time. So introduce yourself, and while you're doing that, I'm gonna put your Twitter handle in the chat bot, like I should have when I started the show. But yeah, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Before I do that, I was gonna say it's the whole Twitter thread that started this. I was like, oh man, I'm getting like, I had 100 followers, but after you tagged me in that, I gained like another 40, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot for me, like.
Let's go. I've never been able to have that effect on anybody. So like, you're the first person that has ever happened to for me.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. So hi, I'm HunterAP. I'm a programmer support engineer, DevOps person. I live in New Jersey. First kind of started getting to like streaming, not so much myself. I realized that may have not been for me, but I'm just like, I love the idea of the whole audio visual online software related stuff. I'm a moderator for ePostVox's Discord server. Been there for quite a while, and that's how I met Knackers. He showed up one day and I'm like, I like this guy. And then joined his stream and we hit it off, and here I am.
So we've probably known each other, it's probably been about like 2 or 3 years now, right?
I think it's coming on 2. Like I think this September was like 2.
Got it. Okay. Because did we know each other? Did we start kind of getting to know each other before the pandemic, or was it like during the pandemic? Because now I can't even remember how long it's been.
I think it's actually been before, because I remember watching your streams and you had like cooking stuff, and it was like, there was no stress. It was all like kind of cool. This was before the rib accident happened.
Gotcha. Okay. Then yes, definitely.
Yeah, God, so it's been a while.
Fucking ribs. It has been a minute.
So sorry about your ribs. Every time somebody tags that, I feel terrible.
It's fixed. It's all better. Thank God for the human body. So what kind of kicked this whole off? And the premise of this entire podcast is, very recently, in the past week, TikTok released their own live streaming software that is meant for, TikTok going live. And for the most part, live has been exclusively on the mobile app. And there's been other ways that you could kind of tie into TikTok's platform to go live on other platforms. However, you had to have a stream key, which not everybody has on TikTok. They're actually very, very stingy about who they give stream keys to. It's incredibly annoying. And so they came out with their own platform. And I was like, oh, finally, there's going to be a desktop app. So I can go live to TikTok from my computer and everything's great. And I want to say that news probably broke like 3 or 4 days ago. And so I'm sitting at work early in the morning, and I saw Hunter post in one of our tech channels like, hey, just to let you guys know, remember that TikTok platform that dropped a little bit ago? Well, check out what I found, showing that it was either loading, to my understanding at the time, it was loading OBS at the time, or it was loading parts of OBS that made up OBS. And then so I had taken a screenshot of what Hunter had said, posted it to Twitter, and it fucking exploded. I never had a tweet pop off like that. And then of course it started like a massive amount of conversation. So do you want to kind of explain I guess like the premise behind your findings? Like what is it that made you post that was like such a red flag for you?
Well, so it started off with, I will be honest, I can't take credit for the initial finding because somebody else brought this to my attention. Somebody in the EposVox Discord server named Rodney, I can't remember the exact reasoning of how the topic came up. Rodney, you got this. But the topic came up about it, and he showed me that screenshot. And I said, oh, that's very weird. Like, the screenshot, I should clarify, is an install script. It's not that they copied the OBS one or that they're referencing something that OBS uses. That there's a link in that screenshot that looks like it's redirecting to an OBS file. That's just OBS's redirect to download the DirectX related runtimes that you need to actually use OBS. The issue that I saw was when he shared it was I went to the OBS GitHub and looked, and I saw the same, almost nearly same exact install script type of check. And you can sometimes, like, that's the thing with software, is that it's hard to say what is original work and what is like derived or copied. But there's like that snippet in the screenshot is pretty much kind of verbatim what OBS uses to check for if you have DirectX installed. So I can't say if it's exactly a copy, but that was one red flag. And I shared that. I wish we clarified ahead of time because we had a couple people saying, I don't see the problem. They're just linking to OBS. It's like we should have given that explanation, I guess. But
right.
The later following was that I looked into it. I downloaded the executable because you need a TikTok account to do that. Some people were just not willing. I already had one because I just randomly watch things. So I looked through it, and there were some instances that again, I couldn't say whether or not for me it was copying or something like that. But as the Twitter thread blew up more and more, I can't remember their names, but there are two people who I believe are associated with OBS that were claiming that they have already done the work that I was doing. I spoke with Zaymar. He's not with OBS anymore, but he makes the Stream Effects plugin, very popular and such. And he tried spending, him and I didn't spend a lot of time looking into it. We couldn't find too much, but these two OBS devs claim that they've already gone through it and found some things. So, yeah, it's wild.
So yeah, I'm going through that Twitter thread now to figure out. I think his name is it Bob? Shit, I'm going Ben Terrell, who actually works with the OBS team. So he is a business developer over at the OBS project. I started talking to him a couple weeks ago because there is a plugin manager, developed by a third party, actually a company out of China that developed this plugin manager for OBS. And of course, anytime something OBS is found, it gets thrown everywhere onto social media. And this was something that got kind of blown up. Everybody on TikTok was talking about it, everybody on Twitter. And then I had seen a reply from Ben on Twitter to somebody else like, hey, just letting you guys know, we don't really encourage the use of this because there's no way for us to verify what plugins it's actually downloading, right? And I was like, oh, well, that's really fucking interesting because that sounds like a perfect way to be a middleman. And then I had talked to him in DMs a little bit to try and just like get some more information. I'm going to be releasing some content on that pretty soon. But yeah, Ben, awesome source, and I saw him going through all of the tweets and kind of responding to different people. I guess like out of the social media explosion, that's probably one of my favorite things is people start kind of discovering things together, and then you have people with different expertises kind of jumping in and giving different pieces of information, and it's actually really cool to see.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, I didn't have enough time to delve into it like deep. I only saw a few snippets, and even then I couldn't say definitively. But then the OBS people came out and said, yeah, we can confirm it. Like that, it's feels very good to feel validated by somebody more experienced than you, like tell you right. You were right. I'm like, oh. So,
and the other thing too is like when you have something that gains traction on OBS, gains traction on social media, it's not until it starts getting attention that you realize, oh, I could have worded that better. I could have said that better. I could have run into it more. But it's like, one, we're fucking human beings, and sometimes like emotion gets the better of us. And two, there's so like when it comes to software and of course like open source stuff, there's so many technicalities and a lot of things that even I don't fully understand. But again, the reason of having you here was to just continue growing my knowledge into it. Can you kind of expand on so one of the main criticisms was it's open source. Anybody can take anything. And of course, that's not really true. Can you expand on that a little bit and kind of help people differentiate what is up for grabs and maybe like what are the kind of like guidelines that need to be followed for a fork like that to happen the right way?
Yeah. Like, so obviously I want to just start, like, some people know what a license agreement, but just to be, specific, it's you have a product, doesn't matter what it is, software, hardware, a phone, whatever. You have an agreement when you buy that from whoever. The agreement with at least the product person is you can only use the product for XYZ and you cannot use it for ABC. That's typically how it goes, or that, the documents get so long nobody actually reads them anymore. But like,
true.
Like a silly but prime example was in 2013, there was somebody actually went through the Apple iTunes license agreement, and it says you can't use iTunes to develop a nuclear bomb. Something you would never imagine hearing or seeing in the like documentation, but it's in there. I don't know if it's in there anymore. But at least in 2013, when somebody just scanned through it, that was a statement.
What the hell?
It's a very extreme case because I think the least of your problems is a license infringement when somebody's building a nuclear bomb. But, that's one example. So then
mass murder might be more the concern.
Like I think you're going to catch them on like something like terrorist charges first, not license infringement. It's just wild. But the general gist is that at least we could focus on GitHub, but it's generally just any open source project, right? Because when you make something open source, especially on GitHub, they tell you, hey, you need to pick a license. And there are reasons for this. So if you do not pick a license at all for your software, right, that means that if I'm the sole owner of this project I create, and if I host it on GitHub, people can see it and download it, but I can immediately find out if I find out who they are, I can take them down. I can threaten them with like lawsuits and litigation. That gives them, there's pretty much I'm just hosting it to showboat that I have something that nobody can use, at least in a legal standpoint. Sure. It's terrible. So then, obviously, when software became a thing, 60s, 70s, 80s, people were realizing, hey, instead of just rebuilding new software every time we have a new machine, because that's what they used to do, they wanted something generalized. And they realized, okay, well, we need to make a license for it to know who can use what. That was what's called the GNU General Public License, or we just call it GPL, right? That was in 1989 that they standardized that, and they realized, hey, this works well for a popular language called C++. At the time was booming. It's popular, everything.
Oh, it was language specific at that time.
Well, not language specific. It was that C++ had to deal with licensing for distributing code. Because if I wrote, a library in 1989 and I wanted to share it with some other company or maybe sell it or something, I had to license it. And licensing was very complicated. And that's when open source also started to take place. So C++ was one of the prime languages that started adopting this license for open source projects.
Gotcha. Okay.
Just going to fast forward because in 1991, they came up with the second version. It just fixed a lot of issues. One of the things was the original version only said you had to release the executable, not the source code, right? So if I built something with that license, I didn't have to share the source code, which kind of defeats the purpose of open source. And then right. If I wanted to, I could mess around and combine other projects into my project to make it very restricted. So basically you would not be able to download the project at all. So the second version basically fixed all those issues. The third version came out in 2007. basically just more improvements. It like tried to prevent, like if I had proprietary hardware and I made software that worked on that and nobody else could use it because nobody else had this hardware, that's bad. So it had licensing to deal with that. Now, OBS uses GPL v2. Just all it says is if I make a fork or a copy and I do some changes, that if it has also, unless I use it for private use, right? If I fork my own OBS and I use it personally and I never share it, that's fine. I can do that. I could even...
Oh, you like, I didn't know that.
Yep. If it's for private use, you can do whatever you want with it. But the moment you redistribute it, whether it's an executable or something, you have to provide the source code, right? One way or the other. Normally, there was like some stipulation about on request, but for the most part, people just have it out there because you're not going to send out a USB filled with the code to every person who asks. That's a waste of time and money. So the idea was if I did that, if I wanted to redistribute, let's say I call it OBS Studio 2, right? That's it. All I did was change the number to 2. So every time it says OBS Studio, it just says 2 after it. I can't, like, if I release it, I can't release just the executable. I have to include the source code. I mean, it's not a change. It's not good, but I did it. So I want to like side tangent. So Streamlabs was in the news a while ago, and not for licensing stuff, but a similar vein. So I wanted to point out OBS Studio, at least the first code for it was in GitHub in 2013, and the first code for Streamlabs OBS was 2017. I don't think it came out before that, but if it did without releasing the source code, that's a problem legally.
That's actually crazy. That it came out in 20, because that's the year that I started streaming, was in 2013, and I remember using OBS Classic before it was Studio, and my brother like helping me getting it set up and everything, and it was a struggle bus back then, yeah. Might I say. And I mean, not only that, but our hardware, our computer hardware hadn't quite been up to snuff. I remember back in like 2014, 2015, if you wanted to broadcast in 720p or 900p, because 900p gang back in the day, you had to have a $12 to $1,500 like Mobo CPU setup. You had to have an Intel hex core, which back then was like $1,000 just to get a 6-core CPU back then. Fucking crazy. But yeah, sorry to just kind of divert there.
I mean, going off that, it's because my mom used to have a computer like that, like a hex core, like first gen core, whatever. And I wasn't into OBS back then, but I decided to benchmark it, and it's terrible. Like by today's standards, it can barely run like Windows 7. It's horrible. So that was the limit of what we had to deal with back then. But
what was your mom doing with a hex core CPU back then?
She still is, but she does it more on the side now. She's a graphic designer and video editor.
Gotcha.
She like has her own like business and whatever, but yeah, it like you needed that kind of stuff because back then the GPU wasn't like that good to do that kind of stuff. Like you could, but it was mostly just CPU bound.
And that's another crazy thing to remember is that CPU was everything in regards to streaming, right? And then out of their asses, NVIDIA pulls out the NVENC encoder and completely. I mean, to this day, the game is still changed. Like NVENC has had a single iteration, and it's probably been out for maybe 3 years now. Like the newest version of NVENC, because that would be the 2000 series cards. Which didn't the first one come out in 2018?
Yep, something like that.
And then I remember building my streaming PC with an 8-core Ryzen and being like, I am going to be set for life. And then like a year or so later, NVIDIA drops the NVENC encoder, and now I have a 200 GPU, a $200 GPU that's in that computer that does what my Ryzen did before, but better. And for a quarter of the price. Absolutely insane.
Oh, yeah. The technology for it is crazy. And it's like, I think the first generation was like the 700 series, which ancient. Like, there's no more driver support for that. But it's like they only recently took that away. It's that old. So it's pretty intense.
Dude, my girlfriend's still on a 980. I wonder when the driver support is going to end for that card.
I think you have like another 3 years probably. She'll be okay.
Okay. All right, good, because yeah, she's been playing Battlefield, Call of Duty. She's played the new Halo. I mean, she's on 1080p 60. That crazy wench. I don't know how she's still living in 1980, but she's doing it. But anyways,
Back in my day.
yeah, seriously.
So just to get back on topic, so I talked about Streamlabs. The licensing for it, it's the same. So the idea is that if I fork OBS and release it one way or the other, I have to use the exact same license, which at least theirs does. The issue is that with Streamlabs, they did like a lot of like kind of scummy tactics where they call themselves Streamlabs OBS. There's no actual affiliation with OBS. That was like a big thing. Like I think Jim or somebody on their team shared that email saying like they got asked, can we use the OBS name? They said, we'd rather you didn't. And then they did anyway. Not illegal. It's not illegal because, what is a collection of three letters, right? It can be argued that it's not an affiliation, it's a name.
Yep.
And they did that with a lot of software, like what came to light with Lightstream. In that case, they didn't steal code. They basically copy pasted what the site looked like, which is not, a license infringement, but it's getting there. It's pretty close.
The fact that they had the balls to come out and say, oh, we were only using that as a placeholder. You blatantly copied everything. And instead of just saying like, yeah, we fucked up, you still tried to defend that shit with some fucking lame ass tweet. I thought I had seen it all. At that point, I thought that I had seen it all. And to see them try and defend that blew my fucking mind.
It's one of those things where it's like, okay, maybe they like copied the site and asked their developers to like mimic it, but the fact that the reviews were verbatim the same as what's used on Lightstream, I was like, no, come on, man, you're out of here. It's over.
Yeah, then you've got Lightstream employees coming out saying, yeah, those are the real testimonials because I took them. I was the one who posted them to the website. It's like, oh man, okay, this is getting worse and worse.
It was very rough. It was very funny, but very rough. But again, they didn't break any laws, at least in software, like development related stuff in open source. Now we move on to TikTok. TikTok, at least from what we've seen, has indeed copied code, and according to the OBS guys, right? It has copied code and uses some other libraries that also have their own licensing that you have to deal with. So basically, the first step that they messed up is there is no source code available for anybody to get. Somebody on the Twitter thread asked, you can download the app if you have a TikTok account. I'm like, that's technically not free because signing up for something, for example, GitHub, there's a reason you don't have to make an account to download software. It's because it's the license. Anybody without an account should be able to do it because technically that would be like age gating or like not gatekeeping.
Right. I didn't know that you could download it without having I guess that makes sense because I've gone to GitHub so many times, but I guess I didn't even realize that you didn't need a GitHub account.
Yep, because they can't gatekeep you from something that's supposed to be open source and free in that case. So that's problem number one, right? They didn't include this source. Problem number two is, I mean, kind of related, but because there's no open source code, they can't apply a license to it. In this case, they can't give GPL v2 to the code if it's not out there, right? So that's kind of a second infringement. And then the third one is any changes that they do make has to be documented and not just like, here's a document of what, like, line 50, we changed this character. It's kind of like how GitHub has, it tracks all these things for you. There needs to be a clear tracker for that kind of information because that is a lot to take in if you make some big changes like that.
So in regards to GitHub, I've seen when I've gone to a particular project that's hosted on GitHub, and you can see who is committing and what the commit is, and you can see the documentation of the changes by date. How do those changes get documented in GitHub? Is there something that is linking the library of the code that is on that developer's computer and pushing it to GitHub, or are they manually making those changes in two different places?
So GitHub uses a Git protocol, right? Git is a program, and then GitHub is essentially just like a website that helps you host and like present this information to people easily, right? Because that's why you have sites like GitLab. They also use the Git app. They basically track the same information, but the idea is I get the code, I make my changes, and I save them. Now, if I want to push those changes out, I have to commit them, and I leave a message. I'm saying like a short, maybe like 80 character message, and I'm just like, this is kind of what I changed, right? I save that commit, and then later on when I can put a bunch of commits together, or I could just do one at a time, but then I push them out. And when I push them out, it goes to my repository, like for example, my GitHub page or something, wherever it's hosted, and those changes get applied to that like branch. So sometimes you see what's called like the master or main branch. You can make like other branches that's like, here's a new feature I'm working on, and then those get merged together. GitHub essentially like helps you visualize how those changes all get like contained, because otherwise that's such a headache. Can you imagine like 1990s, like there's no GUI, it's just text everywhere? That's not happening. So pretty much simplified that process for everybody.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, like, so if I make like a branch to OBS and I say, I'm adding source record, like Exceldro's plugin or something, right? I'm adding it natively to OBS. The idea is I make the copy of the code, and it's like named a different branch from main or master or whatever it's called. I call it new feature / source record. I do all these changes, I keep committing, and then once my branch is in a state that I say I tested this and it works, I go to OBS and I say, hey, this is a pull request, meaning I want you to take my code and combine it with your code, and that'll be in the new main branch.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds more complicated than it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like how messy can that get? Because I know that OBS has their internal team of developers, but of course when you have things on GitHub, you can have any third party commit any sort of development or code to your project. Now, they're obviously not able to commit whatever they want, and it's just injected into the software itself, right? Like somebody's probably actually going through and approving those things.
Yeah, that's what the pull request is. The idea is you make a fork, you do your changes, you ask them, hey, I have this pull request with all these changes. Do you want to like look at it, approve it? Do you need changes made and so forth? Go through that whole process. You know, it's a review. And then at the very end, somebody says, yeah, I accept this, and the code gets combined.
So the only reason I sort of kind of understand the terminology is because I am somehow on developer TikTok, where it's a lot of developers who are either working from home or working for big box companies, and they are making memes about like pushing out something to production at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, or like junior developers doing 1,500 pull requests in an entire week, and it's just everybody dealing with those types of things. So I sort of understand things a little bit, but I appreciate you explaining things in detail as well.
I wish I could like dumb it down further, but you know, that's what happens when you start getting into software development. They give you all these big terms and like, this is what you got to do. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. You got to spend 4 years at a university to figure that out, and they still don't make sense.
So can you spend just a quick second on what you do for your work and kind of how you got involved in software development?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to college in New Jersey for computer science, just 4 year, or I took a 5th year just because separation of class and so forth. But I finished, and I was having a really tough time finding a job, just because the market is kind of saturated, but also there's demand. It just didn't work out for me. And I luckily had a friend who got hired at Express Scripts in New Jersey, like in an office. Went through a recruiter, got in, but they needed like a support person specifically for this really old app. Like, I mean, like app from like 2001 that's running on machines from 1999. They upgraded the machines. They got new ones, but those are like I don't know if you've ever heard of what is it called? Intel Itanium. It's like they tried to replace x86 with something new. It was like kind of like a mainframe setup, but it didn't take off, and it was very expensive. So you can't just like have the same code on like this computer and like that computer, right? It's like ARM. You can't copy an ARM executable and put it there. So the guy that was working there wanted to leave, right? He was tired of doing this for like nearly 20 something years. They hired me and 2 other people. Our job was basically like make sure it's running. If there's security issues, fix it. And that was kind of it. We had to like upgrade some web servers and so forth. But basically the gist is I wanted to show them that I could do more than just support, because I didn't want to get called at 3 in the morning like this guy did for 20 years for his life, just getting called every time something would break.
Oh my God,
so I kind of, it was rough like first year. But then I showed them that being a software developer, I can do more than just support. So I helped them write automation. I helped them write these like website internal dashboards that like tell them the status of things, like all these different like things that they didn't have before, because corporate is very slow to adopt anything. But eventually, like nowadays, I barely get called anymore because there's automation in place to handle these issues, and it feels very good. You know, to like they could see like, oh man, I wish we had you sooner. I'm like, damn right you do.
So you know firsthand why it takes Twitch 6 months to implement features that people have been asking for years. It's just like the way that an idea has to climb a ladder in order to get to production in a live environment is just like pulling teeth.
Oh, for sure. It's like when I was pitching these automation ideas, like big corporate company that deals in insurance doesn't want to hear about like automation so much because they like the idea, but they're afraid of it because if something breaks, everything is gone, right? Like it could ruin everything. You could delete the whole database of everybody. Nobody wants that. But I was able to show them like you have to do what they call like a point of contact. Just like, here's a test. I have a server that doesn't actually have data, and here's my test. And I ran all these tests, and I showed them, and they're like, okay, you could do it for real. Like, well, that took like 6 months. You know, like 6 months of just like showing them that, and it, you know, it goes through my manager, and he goes to his director, and it just kind of goes up a little bit higher than that before they say, okay, you could go for it. But I could say at least with Twitch, there's some features they add where we're like, is that really important right now? You know, but.
And that's actually I'm recording in the middle of recording a YouTube video right now about the most recent changes that Twitch made about giving streamers access to the data for why somebody unsubscribes. And then that was an explosion on Twitter as well. And there's obvious good and bad. I personally think there's a lot more good than bad, but we're going to save that content for the YouTube video. When you were kind of perusing around Twitter, is there anything that was sticking out to you that was wrong? Like something that people were claiming about the TikTok and OBS not the transition, but like the acquisition of the source code. Is there anything that stuck out to you that was like, this seems like it's being said a lot, but is not necessarily correct?
Yeah, I mean, even now, I'm still getting notifications about one person's tweet that said something along the lines of, I can't believe people are still asking how open source software can get stolen or something like that. And I'm like, don't like this tweet because that person doesn't know what they're talking about, because as we described, it's not so much as I took code and I did what I wanted with it. It's the license says I have to share it, right? In this case, they didn't do any of that. Like another related thing is not so much in what the tweets were saying, but kind of based on that is a lot of like TikTok Studio and OBS both use FFmpeg for some like things built internally, right? For like decoding or encoding video, something like that. The FFmpeg program also has its license. Most of it is the same, so like as OBS, the same license, so it's fine. But the issue is that there are some portions of FFmpeg that when you build it, like some example, not really specific, but if you build like with NVENC into FFmpeg, right? Because that's not by default. By default, FFmpeg's pretty bare bones. You have to add all the modules yourself. So if I added NVENC support, that could, in theory, make it not free. As in, I cannot share that built executable, and I can't like share that code, right? Because it may use something from NVIDIA that they don't want public.
So if TikTok, but FFmpeg is open source, isn't it? Right?
Yes. Okay. So, but like for example, that's why you can't build. If I built something and I sent it to you, like a FFmpeg build with something that's not free, technically I'm not supposed to share it with you. You know, like I'm not supposed to go out and give you this executable. I can't even give you the source code because it's also one of those things where like NVIDIA might have something, or AMD, or somebody that has a module built in, right? Their license says you can't share this. And TikTok also has FFmpeg, and we don't know if they made any changes or if they did anything, or if they're including non-free things with this build. And my understanding is, at least from some of the tweets, that's what some people are also claiming. I believe it was, again, another OBS person that said that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, there was a lot of conversations going back and forth, and, you know, it was quite a blast reading through all of it. And again, the number one thing that I kept reading through was it's open source. You can take it. Like anything that's open source, you can just grab whatever you want. Is in your development career, is that something that has just always been a piece of misinformation, or is this something that you've seen run rampant a little bit more lately than ever? Because again, I haven't been paying attention to software for a long time. Actually, kind of one of my first times I started digging into it was with the Audacity business, where the Audacity got acquired, and then they put out an update that had a shit ton of telemetry and information collecting, and then there was a fork of Audacity that was a branch off that everybody was all about because nobody wanted to have a piece of software that was littered with telemetry. So yeah, so is that more recent, or has that just always been kind of like misinformation?
Part of me wants to say that's always been misinformation, but I think now that social media has become like ever more ingrained in daily life, that you hear about it more. Like I feel like the percentage is the same. It's just that now you hear people tweeting about it more because people aren't afraid to call out other people for making these kind of issues and mistakes. Where like the same thing happened to me when I started programming like many years ago now. I went in, was doing my own projects, and then when we had group projects, we're like, okay, well, we could do it on GitHub to like merge stuff and whatever. And in our heads, we're like, yeah, free is free. You just host it somewhere and somebody else has access to it and it's whatever. And then you look into license agreements and you hear about that when you take a software design course and you're like, oh, this is like legal stuff, you know, like things that can, if you do it wrong, could put you in jail or sued for millions or something, depending on what you do. And also, how do you protect your own stuff? But that's because I was in the field, you know, I heard about this from something. Seeing other people not understand it, I can understand why they don't understand it. Because they hear open source, they see the file, and they're like, I could do whatever I want. If it's there, I just download it. Nobody's going to get mad.
Are the GPL version 2 licensing agreements, are those specific to the United States, or are those worldwide?
I believe they're worldwide. They were developed in the United States initially because at the time, United States was kind of like at the forefront of developing software. So it made sense for them to also be the ones making the laws for it. But I'm pretty much if you nowadays, like if you break this like licensing, it's not so much the United States government comes after you, it's the entity that owns the software. And if you want to get into international company versus company litigation, that typically holds based on so if I'm a company in the US and a company in Japan steals my stuff, like this software breaks the license, it's usually by my like the victim's country's laws that they go by, if I remember correctly. So I'm in the US, I'm the victim. It's usually by my law because I'm taking them to court here. You know, I'm not going to their court.
That's super interesting. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any court cases that I know of that were international, at least any that broke news in my little bubble of the world. I don't even know how, I almost said intergalactic. I don't even know how international trials and shit like that work. So, you know, in my mind, with how much TikTok has done these days, how massive they are. I mean, TikTok has to be one of the biggest conglomerate tech companies in the fucking world. I would love to see stats on what app is installed on phones the most. It would have to be TikTok. I can't imagine it's not, unless it's superseded by Snapchat is the only other thing that I could think of. But I mean, if it even millennials and boomers are on TikTok and they're not on Facebook. I mean, I think if you were to put Facebook and TikTok up against once against one another, Jesus, I think that TikTok is most likely on top, if I had to guess.
Yep. Well, that's because the whole issue, remember, with TikTok when it was transitioning from Musical.ly to TikTok, and there was the whole thing where ByteDance got bought out by, or had some investment from Tencent. I think it was Tencent or some, you know, all the speculation about is the Chinese government using TikTok to spy on people. And it's one of those things where ByteDance is a US based company. So they were going to US court over this, you know, because it was.
I didn't know that.
They were initially investigated by you know, to see if this was true because there's a lot of anti-Chinese spying sentiment going on in the U.S.
Right.
So they were being taken to court and investigated for that. And if I remember right, nothing came of it. Pretty much the only thing that anybody could see was that when you type something in TikTok, it would like look at what you typed in your keyboard and like save that information. But that was apparently only used for like figuring out what you wanted to find next. So if you looked up the word cats, you probably want to watch cat videos. You know, it's nothing like bad. It's not like it's not telling China you want to watch cat videos. Like, so, but actually, it was in the US.
Now that you say, right, and now that you say that, I remember that there was an update to iOS where it would tell you if it was trying to get permission for, shit, I can't remember the name of the term of. It's the scraping that an app can do of what's on your screen in a telemetry way, and that there's a specific name for that, and I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I don't know what they would call it on iOS, but basically just like being able to see what content is on your screen.
Right. And then being able to target ads against you regarding the information that was on your screen.
Yeah, I personally like haven't seen that, at least on Android. So maybe they're doing that right now to me and they're finding out everything about me, but that was
well, I thought that it was like an app specific, not necessarily a platform thing, but I thought that there was something that apps could do. Yeah, I'll have to look into it. I remember because then I remember iOS released an update where they straight blocked that, and then Safari. In the newest version of iOS, Safari also put something in that completely blocked that, and then apps started having to ask for more permission for certain things. Like you kept getting way more pop-ups for like allow. So I'll have to go back and figure out what that was.
Because I don't know about the app, the screen jacking kind of thing that it was doing. I do know that there was that big push about like third-party cookies and tracking related information in general. You know, iOS closed down its stuff. Because, for example, I remember Facebook was annoyed about this change because Facebook's primary source of income is selling you ads and products from those ads. So Facebook got really mad at Apple. They went to like court over it, or they made some sort of injunction, something like that. And Apple won, obviously. And then somebody pointed out that Apple basically is taking all that ad revenue that Facebook and others will be making, and they're making it. So it's like, you can argue it's a privacy thing, but it's also Apple just kind of getting your information anyway.
Right. Which has always been kind of like the biggest question when it comes to iOS and just Apple operating systems in general. Like, yes, people claim that they are more secure, but like, okay, it's secure from Google and Facebook and the metaverse, but is it secure in regards to Apple? Right? It's a totally different conversation.
Listen, I'm safe from the metaverse, but the animojis, they're coming for me.
Fucking Animo. You know what? There's a lot of stuff like that I just have not used on iOS, and I'm pretty sure the only person that I use that with is me and my girlfriend. Just send each other stupid fucking faces back and forth every once in a while.
Exactly.
You know, I was scanning through some of these Twitter replies because I just had some questions. Somebody said that's not the only library/work code they are silently installing that's GPL. I have another project I contribute to that is currently sending a hello to them to make sure they play the right way. Can you explain what was he doing something in his software to kind of verify what we're saying?
So let's go back to, I used FFmpeg as an example because it is part of both OBS and this TikTok Studio app. Let's say this person did contribute to FFmpeg. I haven't looked into what they're doing in FFmpeg for the TikTok app, but it could very well be that they're using something, they added something to FFmpeg that, similar to this OBS issue with the TikTok app in general, is if they added something to FFmpeg secretly, right, they need to disclose that publicly because they are distributing the app somewhere. So whatever app he may have been working on that this TikTok Studio app is also using, that they're in the same boat, because as long as you're under GPL v2 or related license that says the same thing, you're pretty much in the boat for this. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Okay. Sort of, kind of, you know, because I don't have like a firm understanding on how software works, and I'm sure that there's certain aspects of development that a lot of these people are speaking in that's just way over my head.
Yeah, I mean, if we dumb it down, let's say I have an app and it has one job. It opens up PNG images. That's all it does. It's very fast and it does it, right? But I make the license GPL v2. So if somebody somehow does what we're talking about here, they take my code, they make a change, and then they don't release the source code, but they release like the executable, that's breaking the license. It's the same thing here. Let's say the guy made this PNG app. If TikTok uses that and they didn't distribute the code, it's the same issue.
Got it. Okay. Another response here, and this was actually in response to Dodgepong, Ben, who I was talking with last week. So somebody said they're required to do so based on the OBS license, which is GNU GPL v2. OBS, in theory, could take them to court if they don't provide all of the source code freely available online with the same license. To which Dodgepong responded, "This is the correct answer. That said, we have a commitment to dealing with GPL violations in good faith. And in the case of TikTok ByteDance, we would be happy to have a friendly working relationship with them as long as they comply with the license." The response below that was, according to GPL, they are not forced to put the source code online, just to provide it if the user asks for it, if I'm not wrong. Is that true?
My understanding, at least, I mean, I was researching this, you know, before the podcast, and pretty much every resource that I said, like that I could find, said that it's not on request. It's supposed to be public, because so if OBS is public, then everything that derives from OBS has to be public in the same manner. If I distributed my code over a USB key, then technically everybody who uses, like, builds off my code also has to distribute it through a USB key that they give out to public people, you know? Like, doesn't matter the medium, it just matters that you follow the same rule that the source did.
Well, I would putting it on a USB key and then throwing it out your window is that considered public?
Yeah, see, that's like, this is the whole issue that people have with distributing, right? Because what is the public? What is the medium you're giving it out to? Because if I leave a USB key out in the parking lot, I don't know if anybody's going to pick it up and use it. They could just format the USB. They'll never find it. So it's one of those things that is contested, but for the most part, at least that I've seen, it has to be public. And by public, it means like on the internet, because that is what we consider the open public.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's really cool to see responses like these that, you know, help continue to unpack it. Gaming Careers actually put out a tweet, I think it was either yesterday or today, that kind of summarized, and I just wanted to read this over and make sure that this actually is correct in what's going on. So he said, TikTok Live Studio situation summarized. TikTok launched Live Studio release. TikTok launches live studio streaming app. It uses some OBS studio code. OBS is open source and published under GPL version 2. A requirement of GPL version 2 is any program using the code must make their source code available, and that TikTok isn't yet. And I've been looking around today, and I still haven't seen that TikTok has made their source code public.
Yeah, they haven't. That's the thing. So maybe they're working on setting that up. Maybe they had it like posted internally for other developers to work on, but they didn't figure out how to do it publicly. Maybe they're making a GitHub page for it now. Who knows? But as of right now, I haven't seen any statements, and I haven't seen any like actual work done about it.
If they were to wait a month, 2 months before they actually publish the source code, and let's say OBS does not go forward with any sort of legal action, is it okay for them to not post it for 2 months and then all of a sudden start posting it? Is that something that's happened in the past?
I don't know about OBS specifically, but
okay,
it's one of those things where it's I don't want to say like claims court, but it's kind of like that. If I was faulted, it's on me to sue the person who faulted me, right? If I get stabbed or mugged or something, and I know the person's information, I know who did it. If I don't go to the police about it, they'll never get arrested, and that's on me at that point because I didn't do anything. So if OBS said they reached out, and TikTok, let's say they come to an agreement, they're like, TikTok, you have to do it in 6 months. and they don't do it in 6 months, they never do it or something. If OBS doesn't take legal action, then they're safe. You know, TikTok is fine.
Interesting. Okay, man. There's so many different ways to look at this. Just because there's so many technicalities, and of course, like when it comes to the software stuff, it's a little bit over my head. How do you predict this going in the future? Do you think that TikTok is just going to blatantly ignore it because they have some loophole, or do you think that you're actually going to see some sort of resolution to an issue like this?
I mean, listen, the optimist in me really hopes for a resolution because OBS deserves it. They deal with enough kind of stuff like this already. But the more pessimistic, realistic side of me, kind of, I've heard, like, I haven't looked into it too deep, but the Chinese copyright law is way different than the United States, whereas they have like more liberty to do certain things with. So if my understanding is ByteDance is a US company, but it's actually like owned by Tencent. I can't remember if they got bought or it's just an investment. But if they're dealing with Chinese copyright law, it gets more complicated with that kind of stuff because just international law gets very crazy. And part of me wants to say that they won't care. Like the Tencent or ByteDance will not care that somebody came to them saying you copied our code illegally, right?
You might not know the answer to this. If they have an app that is distributed within the United States, do they not have to have some sort of representation here that would more so like be a contact instead of them having to go international for all this stuff? Or is that not really how it works?
Well, like you don't need like a ByteDance office in the US, or you don't need a ByteDance headquarters where people do right. Like you don't need any of that. You could have just your office in the one country you exist in, and that's it. But obviously if you're releasing something in the US, you have to go through like some sort of process of like following. It's better to explain for like the EU because they have what was that law like they had a while ago? It was like about tracking, like you can't COPPA, that was like the YouTube one, right? Like you can't market things to children. So if you wanted to do something into Europe or wherever that follows COPPA, you have to agree to those rules. You have to contact somebody and you have to make sure you're like within spec. But that's more so like you distributing your app. That like OBS in this case would have to like, let's say they really wanted to follow through with this, and ByteDance, let's say, does not have a US location. OBS would have to go through the US government and tell them, hey, we're trying to sue this company for infringement. The US government would then have to work with the Chinese government or whoever government that ByteDance is located in and be like, hey, this is going on, you know, yada, yada. But that gets very complex because, you know, international, it's wild.
And I can only imagine how the OBS team is probably sitting there going, man, we just want to make apps. like we didn't sign up for all of this, not, let alone the financial burden that would be on the team to have to pursue that, but all of the time that it would take away from their day-to-day just to make this right, that fucking sucks. And that kind of makes me the saddest because I guarantee that there's somebody over at TikTok that is banking on them not wanting to get into a legal battle. Like, well, why don't we just poke this dragon and see if it wakes up? And that's really fucking sad.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think they only have 2 full-time like developer people that are paid like at full-time positions, which is like I think one is Jim himself and one I might know him named Dylan. Like as far as I know, they're the only 2 full-time, fully employed by OBS project. So to think that they only have 2 people fully employed, it's not saying that, you know, they're poor, but they're clearly trying to make their money's worth by having 2 developers dedicated to this. And they have like the bug bounty program where people pay money to like fix a bug, right? Like, hey, if you fix this bug, I'll throw in $100. But you know, they're not like a big company. Like ByteDance makes probably, you know, millions of dollars somewhere in there from somewhere, ad revenue and stuff. It's very tough to say, yeah, the little guy is going to win this when money is stacked against them.
Yep. And oh my, I can't even imagine the amount of money that TikTok rakes in from product placement, from advertisement, just the sheer amount of eyes that are on that platform from a day-to-day basis. It just has to be insane amounts of money. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's not fair, man. I want some of that.
Amen, dude. Amen. Oh. Our good buddy Alex, technically Alex, had a tweet that he had responded before that tweet had even blown up, but because he's such a smart and witty guy, he got a little bit of that social media engagement as well. And he said it's kind of wild that OBS has been around long enough that newish companies are now stealing their work and not crediting them, despite OBS being essentially the reason game streaming is even a thing now. And then below that, he took a screenshot from the product release for TikTok, and it says, TikTok Live Studio lacks the features that seasoned streamers can find on broadcast software like OBS or Streamlabs, which makes sense as the product is still in testing.
So, fun fact, when I was working with Zaymar from Stream Effects on figuring out what else may have been taken, we came to the conclusion that OBS, everything is contained within the app, right? Streamlabs uses Electron, which is just like Chrome for the front end, for the GUI and stuff. And the way that works is you have a client server. That's how browsers usually work. It looks like from the code that TikTok Studio has, it's basically the same thing. So it would be even funnier if instead of stealing OBS code, they stole Streamlabs code, because it's all just the same like GUI. They just kind of reformatted it. And I think that's kind of interesting because based on that tweet, it's one of those things where all the features are in there. Even Streamlabs has those features from OBS, and you made it worse?
Exactly. That was always... I need to ask around and figure out how the general public discerned that OBS Studio was worse performing than Streamlabs OBS. The only thing that I can think of is that when everybody first downloaded Streamlabs OBS and started using it, that because they didn't have any sources, any scenes, any of their assets, of course, it took up less resources because it was fucking bare. Or I don't know if it did really well at the beginning, but then once they started adding all of their bloatware and all of these things that were tied in, it just got worse and worse over time. But I only downloaded it once, and that was actually maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and it ran like garbage. I was like, I don't know how people use this on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how it got as popular as it did.
The only thing I can think of besides the thing you mentioned, which is like their sources didn't move with them, is plugins. Because if you don't have any plugins, you're not wasting any resources loading them. And I'm sure there were some that people were like, oh, I don't need to do that. Or maybe they forgot and they don't use it anymore and it can't be in Streamlabs. But yeah, it's wild to me that people, I remember doing that before I even joined Epos Vox's Discord server. I saw there were 2 of them, like Streamlabs and OBS, and I said, but they're the same, right? And I was just starting to be a developer, so I didn't even know Electron was a thing and whatever. And I go, they're exactly the same. One uses Chrome for the front end. That sounds cool and all. But then I measured CPU usage at idle, and it was 10 times more. And I'm like, that's not happening, Chief. My 6700K was at 30% just sitting, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. So
yeah, right. I'm just looking at it. Oh man. Just going through a couple more of these tweets because I just want to verify what is being said and whether it's true or not. And I think I already know the answer to this, but in case there's an intricacy that I'm not quite grasping. Somebody said it is perfectly legal to fork OBS as long as you publish your changes to the code. It is a GPL version 2 project. Now they're saying this is true if the original source code has been published, because you can't publish your changes to something that doesn't exist. It's not like you're publishing it to OBS's GitHub. It's, hey, if your source code is up and you're publishing changes, then it's okay.
So what you said there at the end, that's correct. If I have my code somewhere, like GitHub, GitLab, somewhere that somebody can download it, and the changes are documented in that, you have to include the Git history, as I would call it, all those commits, merges, pull requests, all those things. Yes, you are following the license. If you also, include the GPL v2 license. But if I only include the Git history saying, hey, James so-and-so added 5 commits, right? And I don't say what those commits included, like it only just the message, that's not enough. You need the code and what the changes to the code were, right? You can't have part of that. It has to be the whole thing.
So, damn it, I just had a question and then it fleeted. Oh, as far as GitHub is concerned, is GitHub the main or the only place where these changes are committed? Because like as far as I've been around, GitHub has been around. I didn't know about anything before it, or if there was another place where that kind of stuff happened.
Well, so the idea is that they're just, they're essentially just file servers. And they add features like fancy looking tracking of like commits and stuff. But in the end, they're really just storing files and allowing you to browse for like projects and stuff. There's GitLab, which is extremely similar, but they have their own like other features they may have added. There is SourceForge, right? The idea is that
I know that one.
I think one of the things you're kind of asking is if I took a project that was on GitHub and I followed all the rules, right, with forking it and doing, but if I put it on GitLab, right, is there any sort of issue with that? It's public, so it's fine. But if I copy the code for, let's say, OBS again, and I have it on GitHub and I do not credit OBS or like do any of the stuff that's mentioned in the license, OBS can go through GitHub and tell them to take it down. That happened with, I think, YouTube DL. That happened at some point where it was something along those lines, but basically they got issued takedown requests. And GitHub, being part of Microsoft, has to follow US law, and they had to comply. So temporarily, the repo was completely inaccessible.
Interesting. I don't think I knew that GitHub was a part of Microsoft.
Yeah, it got bought out a few years ago. A lot of people transitioned when that happened. They were like, we don't trust Microsoft. But it's still kind of the prime one people go for, yeah.
So, I was just about to ask, how does that get funded? Like, I wonder how. I can imagine that a file server that's just hosting code doesn't need to be very large, right? Because, code in general is text on a screen. At least to my understanding, that might not actually be the case. But and I was like, I wonder if it's free to use and you don't need an account. I know that I've seen advertising, I think, on GitHub before, but how's it getting funded? But the fact that Microsoft owns it, they don't need funding. They have Microsoft.
Yeah. Before Microsoft bought them, they were taking like donations and stuff, and then when they got really big, they were doing like analytics. Like they weren't like selling people's information, if I remember right, but they were basically saying like, hey, look, this is the kind of statistics, like X number of projects use JavaScript, right? Like providing statistics to companies that they were anonymized and they were like, kind of stuff like that. But then Microsoft bought them, and one of the things they did was, besides that, there was like a kind of recently, there is a project that they've been doing where they pretty much scanned everybody's repository, use machine learning to read it and like, figure out what it does. And then they've implemented a plugin for their Visual Studio Code, like text editor. And this plugin would basically, you would kind of like write like a snippet of code, and it would be like, hey, I know what you're trying to do here. I'm going to use AI to autofill it. And based on your work and the work of other people that we've used machine learning for, we could figure out how you want it to look, right? So that sounds really cool, but it's also kind of invasive.
It is. However, if somebody could reach out of my body and say, hey, that steak was supposed to be flipped 2 minutes ago, I'm going to flip it for you because it doesn't look like you're going to flip it, I'd be like, yeah, dude, somebody control me from the inside and help me cook. But yeah, no, I can totally see how that is invasive, and not everybody wants their shit snooped on or their steaks flipped for them.
Yeah, like maybe you want one side really burnt. Like that's my project. Let me have food poisoning, man. It's my rules.
Interesting. So that was something that happened on GitHub?
Yep. And the other thing I wanted to mention, it's not just a file, like a hosting site, basically. It does a lot of like automation stuff. So one example is, let's say I have a bunch of commits and I go to I put them in a pull request, the thing that like before it gets merged completely. And I don't want somebody to have to read through all my changes and whatever. What if I want, like, what if there's some tests, right, that I could run to see if my app still works as intended, right? They have automation that you build into that. And they do this complicated stuff where basically it opens up a Docker container. You could do all the specifications you would with, like, you know, Docker, and it runs these tests for you. And you could, there's so many out there, but that costs compute time. And I think they use their Azure, whatever it's called, system. So they did add some, like, great features and stuff, but again, it comes at the cost of maybe your privacy.
Yeah, you know, when I'm sure that the people who dreamt up GitHub and you know, they probably saw the limitations of what they were able to do, and I'm sure it was a Jesus Christ. I just heard something really fucking weird. I'm sure that there was a consideration when they were going to get bought out that, man, there's probably some really fucking cool things that we could do if we had a trillionaire's backing. And that, you know, that's probably one of them. And the repository scanning is probably another. So, you know, it is one of those things where awesome things that are convenient come at the price of privacy.
Yeah, like one of the advantages of being owned by Microsoft was if somebody needed to take down something for a legal purpose, back in the day, GitHub had power, but when you're behind Microsoft, like Microsoft's powering you, oh, they'll take things down like in an instant. You know, they will not hesitate.
I won't hesitate, bitch.
Exactly.
Is YouTube DL back on GitHub, or did that stay down?
So it is back, but it has like not gotten updates pretty much since then. I don't know what the reasoning are. There's like obviously people trying to work on it, but there's now a fork that is more maintained. It's called YouTube YT-DLP. I don't know what the P stands for, but it's basically if the now the real project. Like the old one kind of died, and this is the new one.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, my dude, I think I've pretty much covered everything that's been on my list. Do you have any final points or anything that we didn't go over that you think would be beneficial to the audience, or anything along those lines?
No, we really did hit home like everything, I think. Licensing, nobody likes dealing with law for much, like that's boring, but you have to when you're dealing with big projects like this. And we don't want OBS to suffer, but we got to let everybody know this is how it should be done, and this TikTok is unfortunately in the wrong. So go out there, spread the word, donate some money to OBS. If you're a developer, go spend your time, if you can, to help OBS develop something. Do a bug report or like anything. Even the smallest contribution will help them figure out something.
I feel like OBS is one of the last things in streaming that hasn't been tainted by the $sign, right? Like OBS is one of the most prominent pieces of software in streaming, in like the history of streaming, and it's like the only thing that hasn't been. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
You want to go grab the?
I want to give context. There's a dog that I'm babysitting, and he is very yelly. 1 minute.
Yeah. Chat, time to guess what kind of dog it is. It almost sounded like a husky. It was like the husky, you know, he got like that screaming howl. Oh man, Hunter is a trooper. He's at his girlfriend's house right now. I'd asked him to do the podcast just a couple days ago, and he's like, "All right, when do you want to do it? Saturday? All right, let's do it." And he didn't hesitate. And this man's on a laptop with a mixer and a microphone. It is not a husky. I was so wrong.
This boy's name is Simon. He is so crazy. He heard the doorbell, so he's freaking out because his owners are coming back. Simon.
Oh, okay.
He's got a sweater. All right, go back to mommy.
Hey, buddy, you're not a husky. Oh man, I wonder actually, does he have wireless earbuds in? How did he hear me when he got up? He hasn't had headphones the entire time. How are you hearing me?
I have Google Pixel Buds, baby.
Are you just hooking them up Bluetooth with the laptop?
Yep. I got so far out of range that I heard you in and out, but I'm like, he's asking about the dog. You said husky. I'm like, you're gonna be disappointed.
Yeah. All right, dude. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you taking time, not only out of a Saturday, but you being at your girlfriend's house. You could be fucking getting it in, but you're here talking with a fellow nerd. And I greatly appreciate your expertise, your time, and thank you for coming on the show and kind of talking this through with me.
Yeah, listen, anytime. I'm glad to help. I wish the topic was a little less dry and cut in terms of, like I said, nobody wants to talk about law. But I'm glad to help at least explain something. The more people know.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you can shout out, sell yourself out, anything that you can share?
I mean, you already linked my Twitter, so that's very nice of you. I'm trying to get more onto it, but I didn't have the following, at least until now, because of this Twitter thread. Ooh. My GitHub. I do have a GitHub. It's just HunterAP. I think it's just 23. There's no underscore or anything. I host my projects there. One of the things I wanted to mention was you asked me to figure out what the best compression for your videos were when you were trying to save space. And I'm still working on it. It's still like a beta, but I've been working on this app that basically tries. Oh, like your thing was like one of the test runs that like it took me so long to get to that working point to test it, but basically it does. You encode the video in like multiple different settings, like have all these copies of the video and whatever, and then you run it through what's called VMAF. It's a Netflix like library that like tells you how good it looks to like a human eye. And then I tried to aggregate the statistics and see which one looked the best consistently, but also had the least amount of space take up. Listen, I'm going hardcore with this, but that's on my GitHub. That's my primary project. If you want to support that, that's fantastic. It's in Python, if somebody's good at that. But that's all I got.
That's fucking crazy. And just to preface that, the issue that I was trying to solve was I have recordings of VODs from I've saved a local copy of every stream that I've had since 2015. Every single VOD. So I've got about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 terabytes worth of video that's just recordings of streams and in source quality. And I had found a video from Epos Vox where he had a script that would take videos, compress them, scale them down to a better size and a viewable resolution. But every time that I would run them on these large files, ones that were 80, 90, 100 gigs, it would just make them larger. It would take like 8 hours for a single video, and then it would just make it larger. So I'm like, Hunter, please God, help me, because I need to downsize this video file of mine before I upload all this shit to the cloud. And he's been working on it ever since. So you are a fucking trooper. And I didn't understand half the things you just said, aside from that there is a machine learning thing that calculates what is decent to the human eye.
Yeah, Netflix made this. It's how they figure out like how to store their videos. But it's basically a library that goes, hey, even though there's like noise in a corner or something, machines see that noise, but like humans don't really notice it. So maybe like whatever, keep it in, that kind of stuff. And they like all this work, right? And I use that to tell me, hey, what looks good in the end? Because I'm not going to watch, if I encoded 200 copies of your video with different settings, I love you, but I'm not going to watch it 200 times,
Fair enough. I get that's so crazy because, and I guess your version of quality might differ from everybody's version of quality. And, who knows better than a machine to kind of average all those things out. That's fucking crazy. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it's crazy. They've been working on it for a while. It's like version 2 or something. It's still like everybody's using it now. It's like the de facto like quality descriptor. So if you want to go support that one way or the other, just, hey, I'll take that. That's like my bread and butter right now, and I need help.
Hell yeah. Awesome, dude. All right, dude. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas / Happy Holidays, and make sure I cover all my bases.
Listen, you too, and also you, chat. You enjoy your holidays.
Yeah, you too, chat. Get fucked on Christmas. All right, have fun, enjoy it. All right, everybody take care. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.